Yeah, so the functional conflict is that supports the goals of the group and improve its performance. The dysfunctional is that hinders group performance. So what is that we should be looking at, the functional conflict or the dysfunctional conflict? Because conflict anyway is going to be there. So some kind of a maximiny strategy here again. Yeah, maximiny strategy. Yes, Alok. Have you heard of the some of the CEOs and the heads becoming a devil's advocate? Becoming a devil's advocate? Yeah, I'm elaborating on that, Alok. Do you know what it is, being a devil's advocate? And some superiors and some heads do that role very nicely, very effectively, and increases the maximizes the functional conflict, which means sees positive or encourages dissent, not just customer's angle, from any perspective that comes along to the person. So X has some proposals, Y has some proposals, Z has some perspective about the same proposals. So looking at the pros and cons of every alternative or suggestions that comes across and promoting that, so that maximum alternatives can be developed. No, it's not about actually blaming somebody as devil. It's trying to like playing the devil act. Yes to everybody who comes along. Yeah, this is something which I thought is very significant here in terms of the types of conflict, the task conflict and the relationship conflict. Conflicts over content and goals of the work. And relationship conflict based on interpersonal relationships. Yeah, so whether your conflict should have an impact on the task only, or it is inevitably going to affect the relationships too. What does your experience say? What does your experience say? Does any conflict have an impact on the relationship? Even if it is based on task, does it have an impact on relationship? Yes, it has an impact on the relationship. So what do you think? Should relationships be allowed to have an impact? Should the conflicts have an impact on the relationship? Ideally, no. So that's what we are trying to say and deliberate upon here. So any conflict process is said to is said to undergo these steps, where it has been divided into almost 4 stages, and stage 5 is the outcome. If you look at the stage 1, which is the latent conflict, or maybe where the incompatibility arises, or there is a potential opposition, it happens when 2 or more parties need one another to achieve the desired objectives. There is a potential for conflict. Other antecedents of conflict, such as interdependence, separate goals, ambiguity of responsibility, and do not automatically create conflict. It can be caused by a change in the organizational direction, a change in personal goals, assignment of a new project to probably an overloaded workforce, or an unexpected occurrence such as a promised salary increase that does not happen. So there is the incompatibility between two parties, two persons, two groups, two regions, two nations happens. Yeah, so at stage one, if you see, the conflict is actually not there. The war, the differences are at the very subconscious level, differing opinions, and it becomes when highly, it becomes frequent, and communication is not happening, it increases. Hello, can we take it up by the end of this conflict discussion? So there is at the stage 2, there is cognition, which is visible in terms of perceived conflict. You start believing there are differences, and then you feel it at the emotional level, at the personal level. Yes, the difference is with me, differences between two personalities, and where the team members become aware of the problem, incompatibility of needs is perceived, and tension begins because the concerned parties begin to worry about what will happen. At this point, the concerned parties do not feel that anything they care about is actually being overtly threatened, right? So the perceived conflict and the felt conflict is felt by the people who are parties to the conflict. So the concerned parties become emotionally involved and begin to focus on differences of opinions, opposing interests, highlighting the perceived conflict. Internal tensions and frustrations begin to crystallize around specific deferred issues, and people begin to build emotional commitments to the particular positions. The types of emotions experienced are important because negative emotions produce low trust and negative perceptions of the other party's position. Now at the stage 3, so stage 1, there is a potential opposition, there is incompatibility of personalities, communication is not happening, clarity, resolving, or maybe the reporting structure is not enabling for two people to handle the conflict. And then you personally get attached to the whole concept of incompatibility. Stage 3 is very important. What is your intention now? Since people know about it, others know about it, it's being talked about, you feel it, you are attached to the outcome of that incompatibility, right? So whether you want to compete, whether you want to collaborate, whether you want to compromise, avoid, or accommodate is the intention of the conflicting parties. Are you all able to understand what's being discussed? I want more responses so that I can continue in the same pace. Okay, so you heard of Mamata Banerjee walking out of the government, or maybe last time the CPIM walking out of the government. What do you think? Which intention, where do you see that? The mergers and acquisitions, where do you see that happening? Collaboration is happening. Now recently Hero and Honda split aside. Hero said we have a huge impact, we have a large audience. I'm sure you are aware of it. Honda said we have an identity, so we'll continue to be there in the markets, but they are competing. Very true. Sandeep, you're right, they're competing. Yeah. So, like this, you see at the macro and the micro level that people take different strategies when they find incompatibilities. Is that clear? Is that clear to all of you? Yeah. So the stage 4 is the behavior, the party's behavior and the other's reaction. And the outcomes, as we saw, is increased group performance. So you would see Hero in its own making, increasing its group performance, or maybe Honda in its own, or together they could have done better, whatever. Yeah, Shalini, please raise your question. Yeah, in case there's a personality difference. Your question is not clear, Shalini. In case there's a personality difference. Yeah, I thought she has a question. Yeah, to conflict handling. Yeah, so the incompatibility level, if you could look at the various subheads that have been identified, it could be in communication, it could be in structure, and the personal variables. Are you all able to see the slide? Yeah, we'll finish this fast and then we'll take a break. So Smita, you need to check at your end. Same as with Neha Batra. So at the stage 2, you might have negative emotions or positive feelings. It depends on how much of emotional involvement you have brought into that incompatibility existing there. So cooperativeness is basically, see, if you look at this particular graph, the intentions to act in a certain way. So you have, concern. If you look at the cooperativeness, you have the concern for the self. You have concern for self, and you have concern for others, right? You have concern for self and you have concern for others. So based on that, you will be either cooperative or you could be assertive. Yes, Sumit, 10 years before they were competing. Today they have collaborated and they said, we will not compete in the so-called areas. Yeah. 2005 they split and they were competing with each other. And also, if I say, if you look at concern for self, concern for self and concern for others. So if you're uncooperative and unassertive, you will take an avoiding strategy. No, I would say they have collaborated, or maybe yeah, they kind of they wanted to collaborate. They've ended up accommodating. Very rightly said, Yogesh. They wanted to collaborate, but there are personality issues there. Yeah, they have kind of accommodated, or maybe they have kind of compromised, allowing both the parties to coexist. Yeah. So that happens when the concern for self was very high and concern for the other party was very low. Is that clear? So when you are uncooperative and unassertive, both, you take an avoiding strategy. When you are uncooperative and you are assertive, highly assertive, you take a competing strategy. When you are cooperative and unassertive, you take an accommodating strategy. When you are cooperative and assertive, you take a collaborating strategy. You think for win-win situation for either of the parties. And what is compromising? A midway between being cooperative and showing your assertion, trying to see again, there are no gains without some giving away. Is it clear? So if you look at the competing strategy, it's a desire to satisfy one's interests regardless of the impact on the other party to the conflict. If you see the collaborating strategy, it's a situation in which the parties to a conflict each desire to satisfy fully the concerns of all parties, avoiding the desire to withdraw from or suppress a conflict. It's a traditional view, avoiding. In the information and the knowledge era, I'm sure you can't have avoiding strategy, because one has to come out and say that in the accommodating strategy, you have the willingness of one party in a conflict to place the opponent's interest above his or her own. In the compromising strategy, a situation in which each party to a conflict is willing to give up something. Now, the behavioral stage, which is the fourth stage, we are talking about resolution and stimulation techniques to achieve the desired level of conflict. How much of conflict is good, or you should not indulge in any kind of conflict at all. That's something where every organization is talking about. From a no conflict stage to minor disagreements, overt questioning, assertive verbal attacks, threats and ultimatums, aggressive physical attacks, and overt efforts to destroy the other party. So we saw that in the the Maruti Manesar case, from a no conflict situation to aggressive behavioral patterns, because communication was not happening. Highly competitive scenario, no concern for the others, concern for self was very high for either parties. And we saw a situation where the organization stood to lose. So the idea behind discussing conflict management is there should be a problem solving approach. The superordinate goals. Can anybody exemplify or explain what is superordinate goals? Yeah, looking beyond your silos, your own function, your own self, your own department, and looking at larger competition or maybe the organization itself. No, I won't say out of, it's how the top management would, mobilize people to see those superordinate goals. For example, if I look at IR relations, how it's going to affect the state, the nation, the community, the society, and thereby make all efforts to ensure that the grievances are resolved, rather than taking a stalemate situation where I am right, the strategies I have taken is right, and I'm not going to listen to any of the, concerns of the other party. So expansion of resources, maybe sharing happens. So recently the Maruti guys came up and said we are going to give this many percentage of increment, and maybe confirming some of the workers and thinking good for them, taking a step towards resolving. So expanding resources rather from a situation of no sharing at all. So avoidance, smoothing it out, compromising, authoritative command, altering the human variable and altering the reporting structures. Maybe looking at some of the personality traits, maybe looking at the communication patterns being adopted, the abusive language maybe being used, and whatever, looking at the human variable which would have brought these differences, right? So these are all resolution techniques of looking into how do you avoid that. So communication, bringing an outsider basically talks about consultants, restructuring the organization, again appointing a devil's advocate in terms of looking at the pluses and the minuses of everything that has happened or everything that is capable of happening in a conflicting situation. Yeah, look, you have a question there. So increasing group performance, functional outcomes from a conflict, improved quality of decisions, stimulation of creativity and innovation, encouragement of interest and curiosity, provision of a medium for problem solving. I mean, you have a third party or maybe a grievance committee or maybe an HR, active HR there, or maybe a counselor, maybe a psychologist, creation of environment for self-evaluation and change, creating functional conflict, reward dissent, and punishing conflict avoiders. Recently, I came across an article where, after the death of the HR person in Maruti Manesa, lot of people, lot of managers, lot of senior guys have gone to doctors and tried to de-stress about the environment there. So it has been so stressful now that, for managers, that if they take a decision which is not favorable to the people on whom it's going to have an impact, they could be under threat, right? So at any point of time, for all of us, it's better to understand conflict and taking steps to resolve it, rather than taking it to an extreme where, the individual stands to lose and the organization stands to lose. Dysfunctional outcomes from conflict is basically developing of discontent, reduced group effectiveness, retarded communication, reduced group cohesiveness, infighting among group members overcomes group goals. These are basically the outcomes. Can we take a break here? Businesses can have, Yogesh, some department or senior guys who takes a proactive steps towards identification of various negativities running in the organization. Understanding, there are constant in Wipro and a lot of other companies, I know they do a perception survey, employee perception survey on various issues. Anil, I would differ here in terms of, not just dealing with the situation as and when it comes, but being proactive in understanding the pulse of the organization, the morale of people, their concerns. The management, people might not be, prepared to understand all that. So one of the negotiation techniques, one of the techniques of conflict resolution is negotiation. Can we take a break here? And a well-deserved break for all of us. So we're discussing topic of conflict, and how is it beneficial, how is it harmful, what is it we should encourage, why is it that we should be talking about it, and how should we be looking at various conflicts that is happening around us, outside the organization, and we have seen a lot of consequences of collaboration, compromise, and competition. All said and done, this is something which is inevitable, and negotiation is another strategy by which we come to a win-win situation, or probably an approach that is taken up to continue with the relationship process, and rather than avoiding discussion at all. Sorry. So it's a process in which two or more parties exchange goods or services and attempt to agree on the exchange rate of for them. The give and take parts of an agenda, a situation, a price, a delivery. I'm sure many of you would have been part of so many negotiation forums, right, where significant people are identified in the organization, and they form a panel. Similarly, you negotiate with another party. They also have a couple of them in them if it's a critical issue, if it's a sensitive issue, if it is significant organizational outcome, right? A BATNA is an outcome where the best alternative to a negotiative agreement is worked out, which is the lowest acceptable value to an individual for a negotiated agreement, which means that you have negotiated on something, and if the parties who have been part of the negotiation do not, by any means is not able to abide by or agree upon the terms, and there is something called as BATNA, which is which is developed along with the negotiated agreement, and that's called as BATNA. How many of you have been part of any negotiation strategies? I'm sure you'll understand the significance of discussing again this as a topic, or maybe as part of your managerial role. Many of you, what is it you found? What is that you have found while you have been part of some negotiation strategies, or maybe some panel, some forum? What is it you found? Okay, any behavioral aspects which you have noticed? Is there a seating arrangement which you've looked at? Any protocol that is practiced in the organization? Any behavioral attributes, any communication patterns, significant phrases that come across as in the communication strategy? So in bargaining strategies, it has been seen that there are basically two important bargaining strategies, which is called as distributive bargaining and integrative bargaining. Negotiation that seeks to divide up a fixed amount of resources, of which is a win-lose situation. Yeah, these are all part of the negotiation. Yes, Yogesh. Integrative bargaining, negotiation that seeks one or more settlements that create a win-win situation. Yeah, so that is now what is basically the distributive characteristics, and sorry, why is the slide? So the available resources in the if you look at that particular aspect in the distributive bargaining, you have a fixed amount of resources to be divided. The variable amount where you will provision some of the resources which you are not capable or which you are not able to provide it from your organization. For example, if you don't have a certain skill in your organization, you will network with some organization or some agency who can give you that skill to accomplish that project, right? That's an integrative characteristic. So however, you will not lose on a client or maybe an account on the basis of you not having a competency. Yeah. So the primary motivation is in distributive is I win, you lose. It's a major personality, I would say personality variable that comes into picture here. In integrative, the approach itself is I win, you win. The primary interest is opposed to each other, congruent with each other. The focus of relationship here is short term and long term, and integrative is long term. So what is being stressed out here is that in the current era where the relationship is significant, you are looking at long term. Maybe a certain client, maybe a certain party is not significant for you today, but the same party or the client could be significant for you tomorrow, right? So you're not closing the door. So the ideal thing is that integrative bargaining is good practice, something which should be encouraged, and something which should be pursued. So there is at one end the party A's aspiration range, at another end there is party B's aspiration range, and there is party A's resistance point, and there is party B's resistance point beyond which we cannot do. This is the last we are offering. And all depends upon the amount of competition you have, the amount of knowledge the other party has about your capabilities or your previous decisions, which is available in the public domain, and all that is in the knowledge of the negotiators. So the whole negotiation process, if you look at it, has the preparation and planning, definition of ground rules, clarification and justification, bargaining and problem solving, closure and implementation. Yes, Alok, you have a question there. Why do you think I should be mailing it? I am sure. Yeah, Alok, why? Okay, preparation planning basically looks at who all would be part of the negotiation strategy, who is going to talk, who is going to initiate discussion, who is going to clarify, who is going to be the spokesperson, who is going to rephrase things. Okay, Alok, yeah. Definition of ground rules, you are talking about your takeaways, what you are giving in, and why you are doing whatever you are doing. There is clearly written down script or maybe justified roles where each one is going to clarify and justify why certain issues are being taken up. Bargaining and problem solving, you are looking at the opposite party's position, their stake on it, and why they are not compromising on a certain issue. And there's closure and implementation. So I remember one of the negotiation processes where I was part of the team, where I remember it was with the international university, and the university was very clear in terms of the Indian part wanted the examinations to be conducted here in India, and the international, who was from UK, well-known university, and they said that the examination is something where we put our quality checks, right? We don't mind customizing or maybe transferring a lot of our intellectual material, where customization also happens in terms of examples, in terms of illustrations, in terms of who's going to teach what, all that we agree upon, with certain amount of supervision and certain amount of exchange of faculty members. So that kind of expertise we don't mind, But when it comes to examination, we would have a complete control on it, because that's where we don't want a brand to be getting diluted. Right, there was another point where the discussion was on the intake of the students. So what is the percentage which the UK people accepted in terms of the best to enroll for their course? Because again, they were very conscious about the quality and the brand identification. Is that clear? Is that clear to the class? So these were something which we did some groundwork, we prepared. Yet there were areas where resolutions were not being able to come out while we were discussing, and there were some issues where they were ready to give away, because they were very particular about the quality, and they were very particular about the implementation and the check on the quality. Right? So they said we'll send the question papers, or even you could generate your own question papers. That was something, again, they were ready, but then the evaluation would be done by the faculty at UK. Right? And finally, the closure and implementation is something which the negotiators would look at in terms of time, in terms of the duration, people involved, and the subsequent success of it, so that many things might not happen as predicted, but yes, there are control techniques which are there in place by which the best comes out. The best comes out. The role of personality in traits in negotiation, it's because you can't leave. Ideally, the purpose of negotiation is to come out with resolving strategies, and not to walk away in temperaments and leaving the relationship completely spoiled. So identification of appropriate personality, people with appropriate competencies in terms of talking, in terms of having control over their emotions, are something which needs to be looked at when you're planning the who should be part of negotiation team. There are gender differences in negotiations. This is something which research has shown, and hence, when you pick up your team, you need not be very specific about whether you should have men or women. It's specifically about the traits each one would have, and the outcome should be positive. No, some of the international studies have shown that the Italians, Germans, and French don't soften up executives with praise before they criticize. Americans do, and to many Europeans this seems manipulative. Israelis, accustomed to fast-paced meetings, have no patience for American small talk. This is something which I have taken up from the research, which is available in various research journals. Because negotiation is some topic, again, as leadership. There's something which you can't become an expert by being part of some lecture. It's something which you gain over time, and how do you introspect, understand your own awareness, and become an effective negotiator, right? And those of you who have been part of international negotiations, you know what works and what doesn't work, and you need to be more aware and prepared how cultures differ, and what kind of cultures prepare what kind of personalities, and the language there. Yeah, thanks, Raghuram. Yeah, so I actually make sure that whenever I take class, you have a lot of ample material to understand the significance of the topic, and your awareness towards a lot of things. Yeah, so when Americans listen without asking for clarification, posing questions, Indians can feel the Americans aren't paying attention. So they see it's a very serious process as far as if you look at the international scenario. So all of those who are in business, who are communicating with people at the international level, negotiating with them, you understand the significance of one becoming prepared and aware of it. Yeah, Indians have a habit of interrupt until unless they're trained not to interrupt now and then. Yeah, good, Anubhav. So you can, yeah, any German traits you found, Anubhav? Yeah, any German traits you have, which probably I would like to know from you? Okay, very clear, very clear. Okay, they want to be clear to the dot, right? Criticize is equal to, okay, what does that mean? Criticize, I mean, the pros and cons of any suggestions one would be making. Yeah, Netherlands also you are saying it's same, omit. Okay, Dutch people, yeah, not manipulative. True. Yeah, so that implementation becomes easier. So when they implement, so they're serious about the implementation, not just this, for the heck of being discussing something, they are there. Good. Yeah. Excellent. Yeah, Indians might ask a question like, how was your weekend? It might not work with the Americans because for them the weekends are sacrosanct, and same is the case with the Brits, with the UK guys.